All right, get ready, because today we're going deep into the crazy story of Lou Pearlman.
Lou Pearlman.
Yeah, the man behind the Backstreet Boys.
Oh, yeah.
NSYNC, all those 90s boy bands. But as we'll learn from the Netflix doc, Dirty Pop, the boy band scam, this pop music fairy tale
Right.
has a pretty dark side.
Definitely.
We're talking about a $1 billion Ponzi scheme.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a story of huge highs, really crushing lows, and we're going to dig into all of it.
It's going to be a wild ride.
It really is.
Yeah, what I find so fascinating about Pearlman's the contrast, right? On one hand,
Yeah,
he's creating these iconic groups, he's shaping pop culture.
totally.
And on the other hand, he's running this massive fraud.
It's insane. And what's even crazier
Yeah.
is that Pearlman's story, it doesn't even start in music.
Yeah.
The doc takes us back to his earlier days.
Mm.
And it is so different from sold-out arenas, screaming fans, all of that.
Yeah, he starts out in aviation selling blimps.
Blimps.
You can't make this stuff up.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Blimps to boy bands. That's a leap. But then New Kids on the Block, they hit it big in the late 80s.
Late 80s, yep.
And it's like you could practically see the light bulb go off over Pearlman's head.
Exactly.
This jump, blimps to pop music, seems crazy.
It does.
But you got to wonder, was there some kind of common thread? Was he always a salesman no matter what he was selling?
That's a great question.
Right.
He definitely had a knack for spotting opportunities, seeing what was trending.
Yeah.
And when New Kids on the Block blew up, well, he decided to make his own version.
Wow.
So he starts Transcontinental Record
Transcontinental.
and sets out to find the next big boy band.
And he found them. The Backstreet Boys, I mean, they were a global phenomenon.
Absolutely.
The doc says they're the best-selling boy band of all time.
It's true. Massive success.
It really was. And it wasn't just luck, right?
No, not at all.
He didn't just trip over these talented guys.
He had a system, a formula.
Okay, like what?
Nationwide talent searches, intense training. He built these groups from the ground up.
And he had this charisma, drew these young performers to him.
Like a magnet.
They called him Big Papa. He cultivated this image of being a mentor, almost a father figure to them.
Interesting. So he's got this talent for finding these guys.
Yes.
But how did he choose them? Was it just like singing and dancing? Or was it something more? Like, did he just understand what teenage fans wanted?
I think that's where his real business smarts come in.
Yeah.
He just seemed to get what would click with audiences. Knew how to package these groups, market them, create a frenzy.
Oh, yeah, the marketing was huge.
And let's not forget the music itself.
The music, right.
Catchy hooks, harmonies, those dance moves, perfectly in sync. He just had the formula for pop success.
And that formula, it worked. Not just with Backstreet Boys, but with NSYNC too.
Oh, yeah.
They were everywhere.
Took the world by storm.
Totally. But the doc also talks about all these other groups he put together.
So many groups.
O-Town, LFO, Take Five, Natural. It was like a boy band factory.
Churning them out. They were all over MTV, the radio, magazines.
Boy band mania.
And Pearlman was at the center of it all.
Right in the middle of it.
So here he is, this larger-than-life guy, making superstars, seemingly making everybody millions. But this is where the doc starts showing the cracks.
The cracks in the facade.
It all starts with the Backstreet Boys.
Uh-oh.
And they start questioning their finances.
What do you mean?
They were selling millions of records, touring the world.
Right.
But the money, it wasn't adding up.
Not what they should have been making.
Exactly. So they started digging.
Oh.
And they realized something was very wrong. And what they found, it was just the tip of the iceberg. Turns out, Big Papa
Big Papa.
wasn't exactly the kindly father figure he pretended to be.
Oh, no.
This is where we get to the really dark stuff.
Yeah.
The Ponzi scheme.
The Ponzi scheme.
Yeah, his business savvy takes a dark turn here.
How so?
He wasn't just a good businessman.
Okay.
He was a master manipulator.
Oh.
He was using new investors' money
New investors' money.
to pay off the earlier investors,
Oh, I see.
creating this illusion of his super successful business.
An illusion.
The doc does a good job explaining how a Ponzi scheme works. But for our listeners who already know about this, what were some of those classic Ponzi scheme signs that we see with Pearlman?
Well, one of the biggest red flags is promising those huge returns with, like, zero risk.
Right.
He was guaranteeing investors these crazy profits.
It was realistically high.
Yeah, using the booming music industry to lure them in.
It's like dangling a carrot.
Exactly. And then he made all these fake companies.
Big companies.
Yeah, to make his scheme seem even more legit. Like, he had this big portfolio.
To make it look diverse.
Exactly, at least to the investors.
It's unbelievable how he got away with this for so long.
It really is.
I mean, he was good at what he did, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And he used his fame, his connections to get people to trust him. People were starstruck.
Absolutely.
They wanted to be a part of this pop music success story.
A piece of the pie.
But those high returns, it was all fake. Like a house of cards built on lies.
A house of cards.
And eventually, as with all Ponzi schemes, it all fell apart.
It all came crashing down.
But before we get to his downfall,
Okay.
let's switch gears for a minute and talk about how all of this affected the artists themselves.
The artists, okay.
So we were just talking about how Pearlman built this whole thing on lies. And it makes you think about the human cost of all of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where the documentary really shows you what those boy band members went through.
Right.
I mean, these were young guys, lots of them just teenagers,
So young.
thrown into the spotlight, becoming famous all over the world.
Worldwide.
And the whole time, their manager is using them, exploiting them.
It's hard to imagine what that must have felt like, you know?
I know.
To realize the person you trusted, who you saw as this mentor,
Yeah.
was actually taking advantage of you the whole time.
The doc has interviews with some of the Backstreet Boys, and you can just hear the hurt in their voices.
Yeah.
When they talk about Pearlman, A.J. McLean especially, he talks about how he thought of Pearlman like a father.
Wow.
That's what's so messed up about this whole thing.
It really is.
He made everyone think he was this caring, supportive figure, which made his betrayal even worse.
Totally. And it wasn't just emotional manipulation, it was financial too.
Oh, absolutely.
These guys were selling millions of albums, performing to sold-out crowds.
You'd think they'd be rolling in it.
Right. But they were barely getting by.
The documentary shows this crazy disconnect between their image and their reality.
Yeah, like they show Chris Kirkpatrick from NSYNC
Oh, I remember that.
talking about how he had a second job
A second job.
at Universal Studios while NSYNC was topping the charts.
No way. While they were at the top of the chart.
I know, right? It shows how Pearlman was getting rich while the artists who were actually making the money
The ones bringing in the cash.
were struggling.
It wasn't just Chris either. Other band members have said the same thing.
It's crazy to think these huge stars were living paycheck to paycheck while their manager was living the high life.
It really is.
It makes you wonder, how did no one else notice? The parents? The other adults involved?
That's a good question.
Were they blinded by the fame? The money?
It's complicated, and the documentary talks about the role of parents and other adults.
Yeah.
Some were more involved than others, but Pearlman, he just had this way of charming people, getting them to trust him.
Making people believe him.
Yeah, creating this environment where no one questioned him.
It's sad to think about all the potential, the opportunities those artists lost
So much lost potential.
because they weren't getting what they deserved.
Absolutely, it goes beyond the money, too, you know?
In what way?
These guys, they were robbed of the chance to really enjoy their success, to build a future for themselves.
To set themselves up.
They basically had their youth stolen from them.
It's heartbreaking.
They
But the documentary also shows how some of these artists have bounced back.
have. That's great.
Yeah, they've made careers for themselves on their own terms.
That's awesome.
It shows how strong they are, how talented and determined.
Like who?
Well, J.C. Chases from NSYNC, he went solo, had a successful career, wrote and produced music, even judged a dance competition show.
Wow. Good for him.
It's amazing to see how they overcame this experience and found their own way.
They didn't let Pearlman define them.
Exactly. And that brings us to another interesting part of this documentary.
What's that?
The way they used AI to recreate Pearlman's voice.
AI. That's pretty wild.
Yeah, things get really interesting here, maybe even a little creepy.
Creepy. How so?
Well, the filmmakers took parts of Pearlman's autobiography, Band, Brands, and Billions,
Okay.
and they used AI to make it look like he was actually saying these words from the book.
Like they digitally manipulated the footage.
Exactly.
It's innovative for sure, but it definitely makes you think.
It raises some questions.
Yeah, like on the one hand, we get to hear Pearlman's side of the story.
Or at least think we're hearing it.
Right, it gives him a voice even though he's gone.
But does it make him seem more sympathetic? Or is it even more manipulative, like he's still trying to control things from beyond the grave?
That's a tough one.
It really is. I'm not sure what to think about it.
It just adds another layer to this whole complicated story.
Definitely. And it shows how powerful technology is, how it can change how we understand the past.
Makes you wonder what this means for the future of storytelling.
For sure. But before we go too deep into AI and ethics,
Right.
There's another important part of the story we need to talk about.
Okay, what's that?
The investors. We've talked about the artists, how Pearlman used them.
Right.
But we can't forget the other victims here.
The investor.
The investors, exactly.
Yeah, their stories are important too.
Absolutely. And we're not talking about, like, Wall Street guys here.
No, not at all.
These were everyday people.
Regular folks.
Who got caught up in Pearlman's scheme.
Yeah.
The documentary really shows what they went through, you know. You hear about people who lost their life savings, their retirement money. Money they were saving for their kids' college.
It's heartbreaking.
It really is.
There's one investor in the doc, I think he was retired.
Yeah.
And he talks about having to go back to work in his 70s because Pearlman took everything.
Wow.
It just shows you these scams, they have real consequences, you know.
They ruin lives.
They do.
And what gets me is how Pearlman didn't just target individuals. He went after entire communities.
Yeah, like how...
The doc talks about how he focused on investors in Florida. Often older people, church groups.
Wow. He really knew how to manipulate people.
He was a pro. We know that.
Yeah.
He knew how to gain people's trust, how to use their faith, their hope for a good future.
To his advantage.
It's even worse when you see how he took advantage of people who were already vulnerable.
Absolutely.
And it wasn't just about investing in Transcontinental.
No.
He built up this whole fake world to draw people in. Fake airlines, phony stock plans. It was all an illusion.
All smoke and mirrors.
To make it look like he had this huge, successful empire.
An empire built on lies.
Exactly.
The doc shows how he used those fake businesses to make his scheme seem legit.
To make it seem like he was spreading the risk.
Diversifying, yeah.
But it was all part of the con.
That was all lies.
Like something out of a movie, you know?
Yeah, it's wild.
This charismatic con man creating this whole other reality to fool people.
But it was real, and it hurt a lot of people.
It did.
It makes you wonder, how did this happen? Were there no safeguards in place?
Didn't anyone see the warning signs?
Right?
Those are good questions. But the doc doesn't really answer them. It focuses more on the people affected, the personal stories.
Yeah, I guess that's the most important part.
It is.
It reminds us to be careful, to be skeptical.
Don't just take things at face value.
Exactly. Do your research before you invest in anything.
Pearlman's story is a warning, you know. It shows that even the most charming people can be hiding something.
Appearances can be deceiving.
For sure.
Wow.
But it's also a story about how strong people are.
Yeah, like how?
We see it in the artists who rebuilt their careers.
Right.
And in the investors who are trying to move on, even after losing so much.
It's about survival, finding strength when things are tough.
Exactly. Well, this has been a wild ride.
It has.
Our deep dive into Lou Pearlman.
Lou Pearlman.
We saw this pop music empire rise and fall. We talked about fame and fortune.
All the good and the bad.
And we even got into AI technology and what it all means.
And we learned that behind the music and the dancing, there can be a dark side.
There often is. So, as we wrap things up, we want to leave you with something to think about.
Okay.
We've looked at Pearlman's story from all sides, but what do you think? Does hearing his own words, even if they're AI generated, change how you see him, how you see what he did? Something to think about. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions.
And remember,
there's always more to the story.